sagittal are very pixelated values. So what is happening here is that the reslicing, because the aorta is such a big vessel, this slicing square is not big enough to cover that. So how to fix this is we can go to under the SV2D segmentations tab. We'll see that there's an option to size. So size, just the sizing is the size of that reslice. So we can make this a lot bigger, maybe 50, and see how that goes. Yeah, so that seems to be large enough, and you can toggle this to see if it will actually work out. But yeah, it looks like our circle for the most part is included, and that's pretty much what we want. So, but for the other smaller vessels, I'll show you later on, you might want a smaller reslice. So starting off with the reslicing of the aorta, you'll notice that as you toggle through, the slices will change. And this is just based on the path that you created. And generally we want to start off, we want to do these slices in order. Otherwise, some errors may occur or our lofting preview might not show up. So the lofting preview just shows a preview of what the model will look like. So let's get started by creating some segmentations of this aorta. All right, so for creating contour groups, there's several different tools here. I'm just going to move this up here. And that you can use to create these contour groups. So contour groups are pretty much just, they're usually circular, and they're for segmentations, the contour groups are an outline of the vessel. So if let's for example, use the spine poly tool. So of all these tools, the spine poly tool requires the most effort, since you need to pretty much outline the perimeter manually, but it tends to be the most accurate. So how this works is you start your circle somewhere along the outline, and then you add more points, making sure to include the perimeter of that vessel or the opening. So sometimes you'll notice that when you're creating contour groups for the vessels, the first few reslices might not be completely circular, but we may still want to include them. So something we can do is, I'll show you in a moment, but as you can see, I'm just continuing to add points here. And to end, you just double click. So now it definitely is not very round, but you can control this. So left click to move these points out a bit. You can smooth it out with manually. There you go. And you can right click to add more, a new point. So how I'm doing this, how I'm smoothing it out is I mouse over each of these green squares until it becomes red, and then I drag it. So I'm actually going to show you how you can smooth this without having to do it manually. So if you press smooth, it'll smooth out your contour group so that it looks nice and round. But that might not be super accurate, so just double check that after smoothing, the shape is still correct and the location is too. So these green squares in the middle will allow you to make the vessel bigger or smaller. So you'll see that I have a bunch of other points that are shown here. And that's why sometimes when we're doing segmentations, if we have other paths plotted, we can turn those off just for now. Or if you want an easier way, just unselect paths and all of them will disappear. And just turn on, right now we're doing the aorta, so we'll want that one on. So earlier I said that there's a way to make this more circular. And we can do that by going to one of the first reslices where it's actually nice and circular. So you might think that I could just add one here, but that actually wouldn't be the case, because when we're creating our contour groups, we want to make sure that none of them are intersecting or none of them overlap. In this case, if we added one right here, it would definitely overlap with the first one. So I'll scroll down a bit more. And maybe we don't actually want to keep that first one. So it looks like, yeah, at about point 22, we have our first circle one. So I can use Spine Poly again and left click to add our first point and subsequent points as well. And you can do this on either display. You can do it on axial or sagittal, but usually on sagittal, it tends to be easier to see the outline. So that could be something you try as well. But sometimes if sagittal isn't too clear, there's always the option to map out your contour group on the axial plane instead. And there's no set rules around where to place the contour group, like whether to place it on the inside of the circle, on the outside border. The most important thing is that you're consistent with the way you do it. So if you start off by plotting them in the very center of that outline, then you want to continue doing that for all the other arteries or vessels. But if you do it a different way, just make sure you're consistent throughout. Okay, so I think that looks about okay. Might adjust this side a little bit. And for the aorta, it tends to be a little easier to do the contour groups for, just because it's much larger. And going back to what these center squares do, first I'll smooth out this circle. So after it's smooth, those points will disappear. So just make sure that before you click smooth, you've included all the parts of the circle that you want, because you won't be able to add more points afterwards. So as a general guideline, you can try to make your contour group fit so that the point is in the center. But if your point wasn't plotted in the center in the first case, as a general guideline, it's okay to follow the vessel outline instead. So once you mouse over, try to get the green square to turn red, you can actually control the size of your circle. So maybe you want to make it actually a little bigger. You can do that by dragging, left clicking and dragging one of the green squares. So I think that looks okay. And then the other green square. So the other green square, I'm just going to turn off that point for now. This one allows you to change the to move this contour group around. So that could be helpful if maybe you double check this contour group with the volume rendering and you actually realize that it's not in the right place. So I'm going to turn on the not the crosshair, sorry. I'm going to turn on the path again. And so that circle looks about right. So what we can do now is actually copy this circle, because we wanted our first contour group to be round. So we can copy it, go back to the earlier ones, and see if that works. So I think